All right. So State of the Union / joint address to Congress that our historian and our resident institutionalist, Andrew, is going to keep us honest on calling it what it is. But, I have to be honest. I think, there was the joint address that happened there this week. The Democrats, sat in the audience, some of them, and they held up signs, Elon Musk is a liar, protect Medicaid, what about federal workers? I felt a bit underwhelmed by that. There are organizing calls happening all over the country, but I have to be honest with you guys, and I just feel a bit hopeless. I just don't. I don't know. Like, I definitely applaud, especially you, Angela, because you hit the pavement with State of the People. And there were a lot of people who tuned in. There were also a lot of people who didn't even know that the joint address was happening this week. There are people who are so disconnected. And I don't want to take away hope from people, but I do feel like, okay, so what do all these speeches and calls, what does it mean? And even if it means nothing except to give people hope, then that's something, that counts, that matters to us. But I just wonder, what can we do specifically to beat back the fascism that is aggressively taking over this country? Because historically, I don't know how many countries get to this point and then they turn around. The closest thing in my reading canon I can think is Germany. After World War II, within a 10-year period, they turned around. But 10 years is a long time for our people to suffer. So congrats on State of the People. But I have to be honest with you guys, and I still feel a bit hopeless.
I feel that. Yeah. Angela, before we go into in more detail the State of the People, I would actually love if we could play the clip from Congresswoman Latifah, our good friend who took Congresswoman Barbara Lee's seat in Congress. Quite a pair of shoes to fill, but she's doing her thing. But it speaks to what you talked about just there at the tail end, Tiffany, this whole idea of once the power is taken, it rarely ever finds its way back to its original place. Latifah gave some comments along those lines. I'd love for us to play that. And then out the other side, Angela, I got a question for you.
I couldn't listen to someone who's trying to tear apart the very structures that we have fought to build in the last 60 years in this country. I had to walk out. It's my job to be in this building, but I refuse to sit and kowtow to the neo-Klan. I'm not doing it.
Had you contemplated that? Did you have a feeling that might be what you would do?
I knew it, but my mother said, listen, my mother is from Malvern, Arkansas, and she told me this morning, Latifah, 800,000 people are expecting you to do your job and at least go. No one is supposed to kick you out of your house. So I wasn't kicked out today. I left mid-speech. Very clear that we have work to do on the ground. And factually, block by block, if we vote, block by block, we can take back the House, stop this madman, and win the presidency. It's that simple. These folks don't care about laws. They don't care about the judiciary. We're facing a constitutional crisis, but moreover, America is about to be sicker and poorer, and none of us are safe. Last thing I'll say on this, a few weeks into me being here, I'm a new member of Congress. I was one of the few people outside of DOE saying, let us in and talk to these folks who want to take apart funding for HBCUs, want to take disabled services out of our K through 12 for our disabled autistic children, intellectual and physical disabilities. We want to talk to them. Not only did they lock the doors, they sent Homeland Security. You couldn't see that behind the doors. There was a wall of Homeland Security officers with their hands on their guns. This is not the republic that we have fought for. These are dangerous times. This democracy is in hospice. Watch out and be close and be clear. We have to organize, and folks have to run and win office because we are this close from being in a segregated apartheid America once again. We have literally shed blood, tears, intellectual beauty to have the small rights that we have. My mother wasn't born in a democracy. Yours wasn't either in this country. Literally, they couldn't vote. Their grandmothers couldn't vote. We're only 2.5 generations past those times. This thinly veiled democracy can be whipped away in a second.
And her comments, powerful as they are, also continue to talk about examples of regimes where then they take power. It doesn't find its way back to the hands of the people. And Angela, we talked on this show prior to the joint address about what our expectations were or should be for Democrats and how to respond to the urgency of this moment. I'm curious as we look at that, and I know your experience is grounded in and juxtaposing what happened at the Capitol to what was happening in regular people's lives, which we'll get to. But I'm curious how you assess what you saw and what we all took in from how the opposition responded to this week's joint address.
Well, one, I want to say to those who are feeling hopeless, I think one of the most remarkable lessons we learned over the last 24 plus hours is that it's a lot easier and better when you lean into what is rather than focus on the gloom and doom that could be coming. The things that we're seeing and reading every day, the things that are being kind of force-fed to us through various media outlets, whether it's in news in print form, on the radio, on podcasts, or on TV. We actually I couldn't go to sleep. I was watching most of the content that we put together for State of the People. State of the People was organized by the people, for the people. Every single panel was put together, not just with influencers or leaders of organizations, but with people who want to see and create change. What we know based on what Representative Lateefah Simon just shared is that there are the powers that be are working adamantly to make our lives more difficult every single day. So we can watch it happen or we can ensure that it doesn't happen. And I think it's much more about opposition than it is resistance, Andrew. I think that those words are similar, but they are different enough for us to lean into providing people an alternative way, providing people with solutions that we create. As we sit here talking about this, and I want to get into the Republicans introducing a bill to censure Congressman Green. I know we can get into that later, but I just think that what we're up against are the way they want things to be perceived versus reality. And if we can stay grounded in reality and the hope that the talents, the skills, the ability to communicate, the ability to spread the word, the ability to create different solutions exists within the people, we'll be good. Our sister Joy Reid said yesterday there was a marked difference between the people who were watching the joint address, which we've been calling the State of the Union. We'll talk about why we're doing that later. The joint address versus the people who leaned in to the truth and tuned in to State of the People. There's a huge difference in the response. People who talking about what are we about to do next? Like, it's a complete difference.
For those who don't know, though, can we just explain what State of the People is? Because not everybody knows. I didn't explain it. I was just saying congrats on State of the People. But what exactly was State of the People this week?
Yeah.
So I think Friday night, there were some conversations happening with members of Congress who were feeling very torn. We should also talk about this, feeling very torn about boycotting the State of the Union, period, going and walking out with some form of protest, or staying for the duration. And the most important thing was that we were able to provide a space for them if they did leave, a place for them to communicate directly to the American people to say, listen, we weren't going to sit around and watch him lie to us. We wanted to make sure that we were serving our constituents and the American people justly and rightly. And so there needed to be a content alternative. Many of us watch these addresses on cable news, mainstream news outlets all the time. And what we found recently, I won't say we found recently, a number of us found out recently that that's not necessarily reliable, particularly when they're going to continue to silence our voices that we can count on to speak facts, regardless of if they'll be punished or not. So we wanted to create an alternative of programming where people could see, one, a protest, 24 hours to demonstrate what is ahead. There were 21 hours of programming before Donald Trump even walked into the House chamber about executive orders, what they're attacking around DEI for real, the 14th Amendment being under attack, the fact that it is a constitutional crisis, the fact that people are organizing every single day, working people and others to combat this, a conversation with state's attorneys general around the lawsuits they're filing and why, the people who are responsible for messaging out to union labor folks and labor leaders in conversation with other organizational heads. There was civil rights protections, everything. Sorry, yes, of course, I meant to say that in the constitutional crisis that is, talked about the attorneys general and the lawsuits that they're filing against the Trump administration, successes and failures thus far. All of that was covered in 21 hours before. And the way that we could politically mobilize on the local level, Latasha's panel emphasized some of this, just tremendous work. Farmers who've been impacted by what Donald Trump is doing, folks who are on the other side of the research cuts, content creators. Like, I mean, it was massive. And there were panels around all this. So it got to the point where many of us couldn't even sleep. We're like, we got to sleep for our next panel. Yeah. Andrew and I were up at 3 in the morning Eastern talking about what we needed to do, why we need to lean in, what the important work that Andrew has done over the years to organize, and the fact that those gifts already exist within our community. So at the 21-hour mark, when I won't say everybody, because to Tiff's point, everybody didn't know that there was this address happening. But for the folks who knew, we gave an alternative. We didn't turn on. We didn't start commenting on Trump's State of the Union address. We started to talk about where we go from here. We started a Black Leadership Summit. It was kicked off by Tish James, talking to us about the road that we have to plow against Donald Trump and this administration, the work that she's doing that we can count on her to continue doing. And then Governor Wes Moore addressed us, talking about what is at stake, the importance of us leaning in together. And then you heard from a bunch of other Black leaders and then members of Congress who were walking out. Mark Thompson, by the way, shout out to Mark, for pulling these members with Vince Evans to ensure that we heard in real time what was really going on. Despite what the TV was showing you, there was some real opposition happening. Yeah. And so I just want to commend him for pulling those leaders.
And I just want to really
we're going to hear
Andrew,
a bit of that. I just want to
add a little bit of context. One, Tish James, of course, is the Attorney General of New York. So it was a big deal to have her be a part of the State of the People, because she has been for almost 8 years now on the front lines of attempting to bring justice to Donald Trump, or bring Donald Trump to justice, among many other things that she's led. I just also want to add really quick context. And the way that Angela described this is kind of accurate. But the subtext that she would never say is that she helped organize a lot of these people and brought a lot of the people to the table. It was such a delight to hear from Joy Reid. The trash-ass cable news networks summarily dismissed voices of color, but particularly Black voices, when a lot of this fascism rises on our backs. So at a time where we are so on the front lines of being harmed, Angela had the vision to do this, and so many people across many sectors that she talked about joined, including hearing from a lot of members of Congress. And you can still watch the State of the People. It's available on YouTube, and also at the stateofthepeople.net.org.
No, it's stateofthepeople.media.
Stateofthepeople.media. It is still available to watch. So after you watch this podcast or listen to this podcast, you can still catch it. And I'd be curious to hear from the viewers if they can leave a comment. Do you feel more hopeful? Because I'll be honest with you all, I fell asleep at the last hours of it, which were the nicest hours. I was in my pajamas and I logged in ready to go on, and Angela was all dressed up and Roy Wood Jr. was on there. I was like, I didn't understand the assignment. But there were some really heavy hitters who were a part of it. So I hope that you all will check it out, and just want to give Angela her flowers for pulling that together, because there needed to be counter programming.
Native Land Pod is a production of iHeart Radio in partnership with Reason Choice Media. For more podcasts from iHeart Radio, visit the iHeart Radio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.